Every single day, you're probably confronted with just this flood of information about global challenges, resource scarcity, environmental crises, population growth. It can feel, well, utterly overwhelming, like trying to drink from a fire hose, really. But what if there was a path through all that noise? A shortcut, maybe, to understanding what truly matters. Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to take this stack of sources you've given us and use them as our guide. Our mission, really, is to extract the most important insights, maybe find some surprising facts, and help you connect the dots on some of the biggest, most interconnected challenges facing humanity today.
And it's so vital to see these not as separate problems, but as threads in a really deeply intricate, complex, adaptive system. Imagine a giant interconnected web. A significant change in one part, let's say our climate alone, it inevitably sends ripples, cascading effects through pretty much everything else. It impacts human well-being, natural ecosystems on a global scale.
That's a crucial distinction. And it immediately brings us to a tool that's really central to both understanding and, well, potentially solving many of these issues, artificial intelligence. But it's not quite as simple as just flicking a switch, is it? There are layers of complexity here we need to unpack. Okay, so we're living in what people often call the Anthropocene, an era really defined by humanity's, well, profound and unprecedented influence on Earth's fundamental systems. And the material you've provided, it lays out three core interconnected challenges that kind of characterize this epoch. First, we're facing escalating scarcity in vital resources: water, food, energy, the basics. Second, there's widespread environmental degradation, and that goes far beyond just climate change, right? And third, we're seeing these multifaceted complexities that come from, well, human overpopulation and the immense strain that puts on our planet's finite resources.
Yeah. And what's critical here, I think, is to go beyond just the findings themselves. We need to understand the science of the science. That means really scrutinizing the methodologies, the inherent tendencies, maybe even biases in how we produce knowledge about these complex systems. Our main tools, things like AI, they're incredibly powerful for prediction, monitoring, optimization, absolutely. Yet their immense power comes with significant nuances and the potential for maybe reinforcing existing societal patterns.
So it's not just about having lots of data, but about how that data gets collected and what stories it tells, or maybe what it doesn't tell about the world. Is that right?
Precisely. We often see real limitations in data collection. For instance, geographic skewing. That happens when models are trained mainly on information-rich regions, say North America or Europe, which naturally can lead to less accurate predictions for data-poor areas, parts of Africa maybe, or the Arctic. There's also temporal skewing. Relying too heavily on recent data can mean models miss crucial long-term changes, long-term variability, and variable skewing. If a model overemphasizes abundant data like temperature, it might underestimate the impact of something just as vital, like precipitation patterns.
And it goes even deeper than the data itself, doesn't it? Into the very way the AI is, well, built.
Yes, exactly. Then you get into design limitations within the algorithms. The way an AI model is actually constructed can inherently favor certain processes, or, maybe even more problematic, it can overfit to its training data, meaning it performs poorly on new, unseen future conditions. And then there's the infamous black box problem. Many advanced AI models, they operate opaquely. They give us answers, sure, but it's incredibly difficult to understand why they made a specific prediction. Imagine asking a brilliant expert for advice. They give you the perfect answer, but just can't explain their reasoning. It raises serious questions of trust, accountability too.
This whole idea of the science really challenges our usual thinking, doesn't it? If our main tools for understanding these really complex, interconnected systems are limited or opaque in these ways, then our very understanding itself might be, well, mediated, potentially incomplete. It kind of suggests that our search for scientific fact needs to actively confront the, inherent boundaries of what these models, with all their embedded assumptions, can actually tell us. Okay, so those limitations become really critical when we look at something as fundamental as resource scarcity. Where do your sources suggest we start with that, particularly around water?
Well, water scarcity isn't some fixed state. It's dynamic, it's relative, it intensifies with population growth, obviously, and with resource-intensive economic development.
Yeah.
The really profound insight here, I think, is how deeply this scarcity exposes systemic vulnerabilities, especially in agriculture. Agriculture uses a staggering 72% of global water withdrawals, 72%. So this isn't just about not enough water. It's about the interconnected fragility of our whole food system, built on a finite, increasingly strained resource.
And climate change just piles on top of that, doesn't it? Leading
Well,
to unpredictable rain, less water held in soil, snow, ice, basically less terrestrial water storage overall.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But look, AI offers transformative capacity here. It really does. It can process just vast data sets to identify complex correlations. Like, for example, how specific combinations of low rainfall, high temperatures, and maybe increased agricultural demand consistently happen before reservoir levels drop. Researchers are now deploying AI with incredible sophistication, building models that can understand how rivers flow by incorporating actual physics, or even creating realistic synthetic data to fill gaps where real-world information is missing. Think of it like AI becoming a kind of superpowered hydrologist, seeing patterns and making predictions no single human could.
The socioeconomic side of this is just profound, especially for vulnerable populations. I mean, for many women and girls in affected regions, collecting water becomes way more laborious, riskier. It often stops them getting an education or working, which just perpetuates cycles of poverty. It really highlights how income disparity can make water stress a critical social justice issue.
And the future projections are pretty stark.
Yeah.
By 2050, 3 out of 4 people worldwide could face drought impacts. And already, 4 billion people experience severe water scarcity for at least 1 month every year. 4 billion. These aren't just alarming numbers. They represent a future where water becomes a primary geopolitical concern, creating unprecedented stress on regions already, prone to conflict. AI models are crucial here. They've shown high accuracy in predicting future drought conditions, often better than conventional indices. This is vital for places like the Middle East, where AI could genuinely help steer regions away from potential crises, socioeconomic geopolitical crises.
And hand in hand with water, of course, is the huge challenge of food security. How do resources define that crucial concept for us? It's not just about having food, right?
No, it's more nuanced. Food security is defined by 4 key dimensions. Physical availability, is the food actually there? Economic and physical access, can people get to it and afford it? Food utilization, can their bodies actually use the nutrients? And stability over time, are these conditions consistently met? All 4 have to be consistently met for true food security to exist for a population.
Yet hundreds of millions globally are food insecure. So what are the complex drivers behind this global food crisis? It sounds like it's not just one thing.
Oh, definitely not. The drivers are complex, intertwined. Conflict is a major contributor, obviously. Climate shocks are actually a leading cause of the sharp rise we've seen in global hunger recently. And then you have economic instability, forced displacement. They all play significant roles. Even the loss of biodiversity directly impacts food security. It affects the availability of micronutrients in our diets, leading to hidden health issues.
Thankfully, AI and machine learning seem to be offering some powerful solutions here. Things like early warning systems for food insecurity, optimizing agricultural output by assessing soil quality, detecting plant diseases, even helping with efficient food distribution and managing post-harvest loss, which is a massive issue globally.
Right. AI analyzes satellite images using advanced pattern recognition, basically teaching computers to see and understand things like crop health, disease spread from orbit. This provides real-time assessments, actionable early warnings for policymakers. It's a game changer. So we've touched on water and food critical resources, but what about the energy that fuels our world?
Yeah.
And the equally complex journey towards sustainability there. We often think of energy scarcity as just, running out of fossil fuels. But the real challenge, as defined by IRENA and the International Renewable Energy Agency, is transitioning away from carbon-intensive fossil fuels, which, remember, account for over 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The goal is a sustainable, zero-carbon system by 2050. That's the challenge.
And the environmental costs of fossil fuels, they go way beyond just carbon emissions, don't they? We're talking widespread air pollution, water pollution, habitat destruction, mercury contamination. The list goes on.
Absolutely. But on the flip side, the transition to clean energy offers really substantial socioeconomic benefits. The IEA, the International Energy Agency, they estimate maybe 13 million new green jobs could be created by 2030. It significantly reduces import dependency for many countries, and it offers increasingly cheaper power options globally. Solar and wind are now often the most affordable choices, even for low and middle-income countries.
It's fascinating how AI could potentially even balance its own energy demands in this picture. What are the most significant findings around AI's potential to actually reduce carbon emissions?
Well, AI is proving to be a really powerful enabler in the energy transition. It's optimizing energy grids, helping integrate renewables by forecasting supply and demand with incredible accuracy. Google DeepMind's AI, for instance, has enhanced the value of wind energy by about 20%, just by predicting the wind better. And some studies suggest AI could drastically reduce global CO2 emissions, maybe by nearly half by 2035, which could potentially outweigh its own significant energy demands from data centers. It might actually be a net positive force.
Okay, let's broaden our view now, beyond just climate change, to other forms of environmental degradation that profoundly impact our planet and ourselves.
Biodiversity is absolutely fundamental, foundational really to Earth's energy balance, its chemical cycles, and its degradation directly impacts human health. It's not abstract. Consider wetlands. Their decline about 35% since 1970 has led to increased waterborne diseases for over 2 billion people. 2 billion. The health of these ecosystem services is truly critical to our own health.
And here's a point that really stood out for me, a critical point for all of us listening. Over 75% of emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic, meaning they jump from animals to humans. And they often arise where natural ecosystems are disrupted. So protecting biodiversity can quite literally buffer humans from disease, from future pandemics even.
And AI offers significant promise in conservation efforts here. It's being used for monitoring wildlife, pest management, wildfire detection. Some systems can forecast fire propagation up to 5 days in advance, and assessing carbon sequestration in forests. Even using AI with drone data to check on tree health, it can basically apprehend patterns that are just too complex for the unaugmented human brain to see.
Beyond biodiversity loss and climate, there's also pollution in our air, our water, our land. These feel like direct assaults on our health. And beyond the obvious things, like respiratory illnesses from fossil fuel byproducts, your sources highlight a really disturbing, documented negative impact on human cognition, on how we think.
Yes, this is truly unsettling, I agree. For children, even low levels of heavy metals like lead and mercury are linked to reduced cognitive development, IQ deficits. Traffic-related air pollution, the stuff many kids breathe every day, is associated with slower cognitive development, reduced working memory, increased inattentiveness. For adults, heavy metals seem to contribute to cognitive decline, potentially even dementia. And just generally, environmental stress from extreme heat or lack of oxygen, hypoxia, even extreme colds, it can impair complex tasks. It can lead to anxiety, depression, and decision fatigue, just from the constant trade-offs you have to make when resources are scarce.
Wow, that's a significant mental burden on top of everything else physical. But AI is stepping up here too, isn't it? In monitoring and maybe even remediation.
It is. It's used for real-time precision monitoring and forecasting of air quality globally. And it's enhancing satellite imagery for assessing land degradation. Things like upscaling low-resolution images, removing noise in clouds, which gives us much better input for tracking deforestation, for example. Now, let's maybe turn to the trajectory of human population growth and its, well, undeniable link to these challenges we've been discussing. History offers some really stark, vivid lessons here, lessons we probably shouldn't ignore.
Indeed. Take Easter Island or Rapa Nui. It's Polynesian settlers. They flourished for a time, creating those amazing moai statues we all know. But within about 1,200 years, the island was completely deforested. They used the wood for the statues, for agriculture. This led to severe soil erosion, drying springs, and without wood for canoes, they couldn't fish effectively or even leave. The result, widespread famine, social breakdown, and a really drastic population reduction. It's a sobering tale.
And the Maya civilization's terminal classic decline around 800-950 CE is another prominent example often cited. Large-scale landscape alterations, huge demands on resources, amplified by severe droughts. It led to increasing societal conflicts and ultimately decisions to just relocate, abandon cities. The environment did recover after abandonment, but the Maya population in that heartland never truly did.
These historical stories, they powerfully illustrate what's sometimes called the sunk cost fallacy and how societies respond, right? Despite severe stress, societies tend to just continue business as usual because of the high costs already invested in existing systems, which ultimately leads to disaffection, breakdown, collapse. It's a trap we really need to recognize today.
And this brings us neatly to population dynamics and how AI is used in modeling them. AI and machine learning have become really powerful tools in demographic research. They're capable of predicting population growth, analyzing migration patterns, modeling fertility, marriage, aging trends. They can even assess things like social media's impact on population changes. This gives policymakers more confidence in their demographic programs through hopefully accurate long-term predictions.
But that critical issue of how the models are designed, the potential biases, it resurfaces here too, doesn't it?
It does. AML models and demographics are definitely susceptible to limitations in their data, their algorithms, how they're deployed, which means they could potentially replicate and even amplify historical inequalities in things like resource allocation, especially for vulnerable populations. For example, if a model predicting energy demand relies mostly on economic indicators, it might completely overlook social factors and disproportionately affect certain communities when policies are based on it. And it's just vital to reiterate. Population growth is a fundamental driver of increasing resource demand across all sectors: water, food, energy, land. This really highlights the concept of ecological carrying capacity. The maximum population size in an environment can sustain indefinitely without being degraded. Understanding this limit, or trying to, is essential for managing resources sustainably.
And the strain on resources, often made worse by climate change, frequently leads to climate migration and conflict. There's this theorized link between environmental change and instability, but the sources caution it's often oversimplified, right?
Yes, exactly. Weak governance and, crucially, elite capture of resources are frequently the primary exacerbating factors. Look at Yemen, for instance. Prolonged desertification, groundwater depletion, coupled with weak central governance that led to increased land and water conflicts. Similarly, in Darfur, drought combined with deep pre-existing social divisions escalated what were localized resource disputes into full-blown civil war. The environment was a trigger, maybe, but not the sole cause. And forced climate migrants themselves faced just severe challenges: limited access to employment, food, shelter, healthcare. And the arrival of environmental migrants can burden the economic and resource base of receiving areas, which can promote competition over resources, potentially generating distrust, even conflict between migrant and host communities. It's a very difficult situation.
Okay, let's shift our focus now towards the more profound philosophical, ethical, and behavioral dimensions of this whole human-nature relationship. Because this isn't just about science and economics, is it? It's fundamentally about our values, our place in the world.
Absolutely. Environmental philosophy really grapples with how humanity should relate to the natural world. A central debate explores anthropocentrism. It's the human-centered view.
Right.
It values nature for its utility to us. We protect it because it benefits us. Instrumental value. Versus ecocentrism. That's nature-centered. It posits that ecosystems, the whole ecosphere, have an intrinsic value. They're inherently valuable, regardless of human use. It emphasizes interconnectedness.
And you can see how this debate profoundly shapes policies. From aggressive ecosystem services management on one hand to strictly limiting human activities in sensitive areas on the other.
Yes. And what's fascinating here is how the planetary boundaries framework, which is a robust scientific concept, kind of bridges these philosophical discussions. It defines humanity's safe operating space within Earth's systems. It highlights 9 key global change processes where human activities affect these systems. And what's truly alarming, maybe the headline finding, is that 6 out of these 9 boundaries are currently exceeded. 6 out of 9. This threatens long-term stability and shows quite clearly the inextricable link between ecological integrity and human well-being. This isn't just theoretical, it has real, immediate consequences for us.
That scientific evidence really compels a profound moral imperative, doesn't it? To act decisively. We have a responsibility, arguably, to protect humankind, certainly to future generations who will suffer the impacts of our inaction, and maybe also to recognize Earth's intrinsic value, not just its usefulness to us.
Central to this ethical dimension is the principle of intergenerational equity. The idea that each generation has an obligation to pass on Earth's resources in at least as good condition as they receive them. This includes comparable options, quality, and access to resources for all generations, future ones included. And it also directly connects to intragenerational equity, addressing the pressing needs of impoverished regions today, ensuring justice now, not just deferring it.
This also challenges that short-term, kind of time-limited pie view of resource allocation we often fall into. Your sources give a really compelling example with antibiotic production. Prioritizing cheaper drugs, okay, but without considering the pollution from manufacturing, that contributes to antibiotic resistance, undermining future health care for everyone.
Exactly. Whereas the sustainability principle would say, no, we avoid polluting supply chains, even if it means higher immediate costs. Why? To preserve our future ability to meet vital needs, like having effective medicines. And culture, profoundly shapes our consumption patterns. It goes way beyond just access or technology. Cultural values like Whether a society leans more collectivist or individualistic influence decisions about things like energy efficiency, social norms, the whole keeping up with the Joneses effect, can drive up consumption regardless of individual environmental awareness. Everyday practices matter.
So it seems pretty clear. Environmental problems are fundamentally human problems, which requires a really deep understanding of how people think, what we value, and the context in which we act, reasonably or otherwise.
And the consequences, again, disproportionately affect vulnerable populations. They face more food and water insecurity, more respiratory illness, more mental distress, or economic disruption. This makes environmental change a significant social justice issue that absolutely must be addressed alongside the purely environmental impacts.
All of this really brings us to leadership and governance. It seems effective leadership and robust governance are just indispensable for navigating these challenges towards a sustainable future. Your sources define sustainable leadership pretty clearly, prioritizing people and planet with an extended-term mindset, thinking long-term.
Yes, and the qualities of effective environmental leaders identified include deep environmental literacy, critical thinking, systems thinking, anticipating those unintended consequences. They also need ethical leadership, a capacity for innovation, strong data analysis skills, a genuinely collaborative spirit, and adaptability. Things are always changing.
We're also apparently seeing an evolution in governance models, moving from what's called old governance, think top-down treaties like Kyoto, towards new governance theory, which emphasizes a more, polycentric, multi-stakeholder approach. With informal cooperation, public-private partnerships, it sounds more complex, but maybe more effective.
Potentially, yes. It aims to be more flexible and inclusive.
Right.
But there's a significant challenge baked into democratic systems: democratic myopia. Election cycles often incentivize short-term gains over tackling long-term, slow-burn problems like biodiversity loss. And, disturbingly, there's the potential manipulation of science by powerful interests. Corporate lobbying, for instance. Some companies actively lobby against climate policy, even while making public commitments to sustainability, which raises profound ethical questions about the integrity of our decision-making processes.
Okay, now let's try to pivot from these daunting challenges towards a more aspirational yet hopefully pragmatic vision, a future where perhaps every child is healthy, educated, and good, as your sources put it, a state intrinsically linked to a sustainable, balanced universe. What does that look like?
Well, sustainable human flourishing is often defined as achieving high well-being across multiple dimensions: physical, psychological, social, economic, even spiritual, while simultaneously ensuring ecological health and intergenerational equity. This definition explicitly recognizes that human well-being is fundamentally dependent on healthy ecosystems. You can't really have one without the other long-term.
And we can cultivate this right from childhood, can't we? Leading by example, active outdoor engagement, teaching respect for nature, simple things like staying on trails, not disturbing wildlife, fostering responsibility by caring for plants or animals, even playful habits like home recycling. These things can instill empathy and environmental stewardship from a really early age.
Education is absolutely a cornerstone here. Environmental education builds the knowledge, the skills, the motivation necessary for making informed decisions, and for engaging in civic life, taking action based on that knowledge.
Right. And civic engagement, in turn, empowers learners. It helps them resolve environmental problems through community governance. It promotes critical thinking, reflection on the consequences of actions. It's about putting knowledge into practice, collectively.
And ethical development is integral to all of this. Ethical leaders serve as crucial role models. They help foster an environmental culture within organizations, within communities. They strive to balance those often competing economic, social, and environmental dimensions, even when facing pressures for short-term profitability.
Achieving this kind of sustainable future clearly requires transformative societal structures and policies. It's not just individual action. Circular economy models are mentioned as a real paradigm shift from our current take, make, dispose linear system. Your sources give some compelling examples. Industrial symbiosis, where companies exchange surplus materials like they're one giant factory. Denmark's amazing 93% return rate for drink cans and bottles, that shows how effective closed-loop systems can be. And the Circle House project in Denmark, designing buildings with reusable materials right from the start, drastically cutting CO2 from construction.
We also need to focus on building climate-resilient communities through strategies like reducing the urban heat island effect, innovative flood management, using green infrastructure that works with nature, not against it.
And it all seems to tie back to societal values, doesn't it? Honesty, respect, fairness. These are critical in driving sustainable practices. But we also need to be able to negotiate the tensions between competing values, like individual liberty versus social equality. Finding common ground there is key.
The UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, they provide a really comprehensive framework for global action on many of these fronts. And there are numerous success stories emerging in poverty reduction, hunger, health, clean water, affordable energy, and more. These show what concerted efforts by universities, governments, communities working together can actually achieve. It's not all doom and gloom.
Okay, we've covered a huge amount about the challenges, potential solutions, even aspirational goals. But now we have to address that uncomfortable but absolutely crucial question. When these environmental changes happen, or when we implement policies to address them, who benefits and who ends up as the victim or the loser?
Yet the distributional impacts are profoundly uneven. That's a consistent finding. Vulnerable populations are consistently the primary victims. About half of the world's 8 million people currently live in regions highly exposed to climate change risks. Half. Low-income countries, often with large child populations, are particularly susceptible. Forced climate migrants, as we mentioned, face severe challenges, access to care discrimination. The elderly and the ill are also at increased risk from things like heat waves or disease vector shifting.
This leads us directly to the stark reality of environmental racism, a term describing how communities of color, low-income populations are disproportionately targeted for locating polluting industries, waste sites. We see this, tragically, in the lead contamination in Flint, Michigan's water supply. In Cancer Alley in Louisiana, with its incredibly high concentration of petrochemical plants right next to predominantly Black communities, in the legacy of uranium mining on Navajo Nation lands, or toxic waste facilities sited near largely Latino farm worker communities like Kettleman City, California. These aren't isolated incidents. They represent a pattern of unequal environmental burdens.
And even well-intentioned climate change policies, particularly around decarbonization, can disproportionately impact low-income households. They often dedicate a larger portion of their income to energy costs and struggle to afford the transition to greener alternatives like electric vehicles or home retrofits without support.
There's also that cruel irony, isn't there? The Global South generally bears the brunt of climate change impacts. Despite being far less responsible historically for causing the problem, it often compounds historical patterns of Western exploitation, and frequently their voices are excluded from conversations about the solutions.
Conversely, the winners in this scenario, well, we often include industries or specific firms that manage to adapt effectively to environmental policies, or those that directly benefit from the green transition, renewable energy companies, for example. However, it's also documented that those who benefit most from the status quo, like parts of the fossil fuel industry, have historically lobbied against climate protection, sometimes quite aggressively, even while publicly committing to sustainability goals.
So, given all this inequality, these uneven impacts, what does this all mean for what's right and wrong in our collective response? How do we navigate that?
Well, it connects directly back to the principle of justice. Your sources argue quite strongly that carbon-spewing nations, historically the wealthy ones, violate human rights by causing disproportionate climate change impacts, often for their own self-enrichment. So a right response, an ethical response, involves acknowledging this injustice first. It means prioritizing distributive equity, ensuring that the benefits and burdens are shared fairly, and tackling the root causes of vulnerability, ensuring support actually reaches those most affected.
And societal patience and tolerance, especially when resources get scarce and conflicts arise, must always be guided by a firm adherence to human rights, correct?
Absolutely. Psychological processes like dehumanization, ethnocentrism, creating enemy images, these can tragically lead to prejudice, discrimination, even attempts at cultural destruction in conflict situations. We have to guard against that. So what does a proper societal reaction look like according to these sources? First, upholding human rights and dignity for all, non-negotiable. Promoting transparency and accountability, including in these powerful AI systems we rely on. Fostering fairness and non-discrimination in all policies and actions. Encouraging that multi-stakeholder adaptive governance we talked about. Investing seriously in public awareness and environmental literacy. Applying the sustainability principle consistently to prevent long-term depletion for short-term gain. And for those who intentionally break rules or seek to eliminate other cultures and resource conflicts, the response needs to be firm but principled. Legal action, maybe restorative justice, where appropriate, education and rehabilitation, community-based solutions. And crucially, always addressing the underlying root causes the scarcity, the governance failures that fuel the conflict in the first place.
Wow. We have taken a truly deep dive today. We've explored the profound interconnectedness of these global challenges, scarcity, environment, population. We've seen AI as this incredibly powerful but also complex and potentially biased tool. We've reflected on some stark lessons from history and highlighted the absolutely critical role of human choices, our principles, our ethics, and our systems of governance.
Humanity really does stand at a critical juncture. We face immense risks, no doubt about it, but also, arguably, unparalleled opportunities for transformation, for building something better. And understanding the science of the science, those limitations and those nuances in how we generate knowledge is absolutely crucial for building trust and ensuring our actions are truly effective, not just well-intentioned.
And if we truly connect all this to the bigger picture, the core truth seems unavoidable. Human well-being is inextricably linked to ecological integrity. Our flourishing depends on the planet's health. The pursuit of human flourishing simply cannot come at the expense of planetary health, or it won't be sustainable. They are, in fact, mutually reinforcing, or should be.
Exactly. And perhaps the ultimate purpose of all the science behind understanding these complex issues, all this data, all these models, is really to empower you, the listener, to prepare, to mitigate, to adapt, and maybe most importantly, to innovate. This knowledge is essential to prevent manipulation, to ensure our collective actions are guided by justice, by sustainability, and by the long-term well-being of all life on Earth.
We really encourage you to continue this deep dive in your own way, perhaps by exploring one of those circular economy examples we mentioned, like Denmark's impressive bottle deposit system, maybe, or by looking into an environmental justice issue closer to home in your own community. And this raises, I think, an important final question for all of us. What small or big step will you take next to contribute in your own way to a more balanced universe?
This is DigitView.